We have one?
Yeah, I have one.
Is that our participation awards?
Yeah, you got one from TEC and one from Mitsu.
All right, your turn.
Yeah. You want to take a picture with
Why did you sign to the group chat?
with the
We're already paneling, so they may not be
Okay, it's live stream. I'll run out for a second.
You're in the middle.
Right, okay.
That's Mike.
That's you? Or that's,
That's
that's you.
It would be nicer if it was alone, because the other panel just like
It was all
mixed
over.
up. Yeah.
I'll face over there first, Ari first. Now face over
Look over
here.
there.
Oh, my face is ready.
What are we looking at?
Yeah.
When you guys are ready, we're ready to start.
We are ready, let's go, people, come in.
Telling us to sit down.
I don't know. Questions? Okay, so we're going to start a panel discussion. We have leading consultants from MSS, Third Stage, and Technology Evaluation Centers. The theme is the good and the bad and the ugly of digital transformation. So we've talked a lot about how to prepare, how to select, how to implement, how to go live. And the big challenge is, how do you move from there? How do you keep things going so that you can make sure that you're continuously improving? So let's have a discussion around that today. And by the way, I want to spend some time and collect some questions from everybody here to be able to engage these experts. This is a great opportunity to do that. So let's start by talking about what are the key factors for successful digital transformation? Do you want to start?
Sure, I can start with that. I always try to do these inclusive too, so you can remember them. But so first and foremost, it's not a technology project. So you got to begin with the end in mind. What is success look like? And it's business success or organizational success, not go live. Number two is clearly understand the different roles and responsibilities that need to be played to actually get through this process, and what you're expected to do and what you expect your technology partners to do, and then be honest with yourself about your internal capabilities and what you can or can't do around that.
Anybody want to add to that?
I'd say, in addition, understanding exactly what the magnitude of change is and how long it's going to take you to get there, which sort of leads to another point, which is just the planning and the preparation up front, which I think a lot of what you're mentioning too will fall within that. Just make sure you've got a clear plan up front.
I could add just like, again, complementing what you guys are saying is the expectations, set the proper expectations of where you are, where you're going to go, and make sure that everybody's aligned in terms of understanding that where that end goal is. And I cannot agree more with saying that this is not a technology project, it's a business project. But technology is just enabling that change. So that's what.
There's the priority.
That's the
There's the
keyword.
priority right there.
Yeah.
Eric, do you have any examples of successful digital transformations?
Yeah, so one example is one that's top of mind because I mentioned it in the presentation this morning, but it was a large steel company that had gone through a transformation. In fact, they're still going through it. It's a 7-year implementation of ERP. And what they did though, I mentioned this morning in my presentation how they hate the word change management, but they're really good at change management. But change management sort of baked into the way they lead and how they operate as a company. They're used to being innovative and changing and adapting and that sort of thing. So it comes fairly naturally to them. So that's one dimension that made them successful. The other dimension that I think makes them really successful is they don't buy into BS. So they know they can see through BS. So like when a vendor or a system integrator or even us as consultants, if they sense that that's not going to work for them, they do it in a way that's not resistant to ideas, but they know their culture and their organization well enough to know what's going to work and what's not. And so, if an outside party comes in with a recommendation, they'll take some of the advice and other advice and say that doesn't work and here's why. And they just have a clear sense of they have a good self-awareness, I guess I'd say. And they sort of ties into another thing, which is they take extreme ownership of the project, almost to a fault sometimes, where they don't allow any outside party to control the project. They own it, they control it, they rely on experts, but they are selective about how they do it. And so they just have a very clear vision of who they are, and they know what their weaknesses are. They're not perfect, but they have a better sense than most organizations.
They sound really like a mature organization. Wow.
They are, yeah. And
But can we take some lessons learned that can be applied to companies that aren't so advanced in their approaches from that?
like things that.
What lessons would you take from that you could apply to other companies?
Well, I think if you're not that mature, or if you're not as large an organization, you can still do some things like, obviously just taking ownership. I mean, that alone and saying instead of hiring an outside vendor that's going to run everything, I'm going to have someone internally, an executive sponsor or a project manager that's going to own the project. And their job is to decide when and where and how you use that outside help, but not totally delegate everything out. So I think that's easier said than done. A lot of organizations don't want to do that, and it's not intuitive because a lot of us think, well, I'm not an expert in ERP implementation, so therefore I need to go hire someone who's just going to run the whole thing for me. But that's not a good excuse. I mean, you need that outside help, but you have to figure out how to be a leader in the organization. And actually, that example I gave you with a successful client, they actually didn't know that much about technology. They weren't ERP experts. They had a non-technologist running the project for a long time, and then they had a reorg, and it was not performance. They just reorged it, and someone else took over. It was a little more technical, but they were very knowledgeable of the business. The guys and gals that ran it knew the business really well, and they would admit we don't really know much about technology, and that was okay. So us, like, fine. I mean, you've got outside consultant, know technology, you know your business, and run with that. So I think that's another lesson for any business of any size is use your business leaders, regardless of how little they know about technology, use them as your key people that are going to run and own the project.
Anybody have a different example?
Actually, I just want to, not a particular example for a case, but I would say that any successful project that we have is usually are for people that are not focused on technology to begin with. So they are basically looking at the business project, the business goals, and I can say that the ones that focus on the technology first and come to us and say, okay, I want a selection between NetSuite and Microsoft that focus on these two, those are usually the ones that the project doesn't go that well. So the more you get rid of the technology notion at the beginning of the project, focus on your, requirements, the scope, and the needs of the business, the better you open up your mind in terms of achieving the goals of the ERP to make sure that what you're getting at the end, which is going to be technology, but is going to fit your business requirements. That's what I see that often on the projects that we don't have that clear vision at the end is usually because we start with narrowing down technology too quick.
Do you want to add to that? I see you
Um,
kind of fighting.
Well, as far as an example, I did a large digital transformation with 200 physicians in medical group. That pretty much went from paper to fully electronic. And I think the key to that is again, we didn't look at it as a technology project, it was a change project. And so much of our focus, especially within the physician, trying to get them through the change cycle is critical. And you have to look at, what's in it for me, part of that story, how is this going to help them care better for their patients. You got to speak their language. And I think that's, and there's this balance between external expertise. Like we always come in and say, you guys are the experts in your business, we're not. But we're the experts on helping you move that, move the ball forward and actually achieve the improved outcomes that you're looking for. So it's that combination, I think Eric had in his presentation is one that triangle, right? It's what are the different roles? We focus a lot on, being clear on your roles and playing your roles well and being held accountable to your roles, right? And so I think the other thing that bringing in an external driver for some of this really helps, depending on the culture, and it sounds like we're still looking at a really unique culture. Those are the ones you want to look for, right? I think the key to a lot of that is being able to go into any office in the building and hold them accountable, right? So a lot of companies will take an IT project manager, they'll put them in, hey, you're going to run this ERP implementation for us, and expect them to be able to go into the CFO's office and say, you guys are getting stuff done. And a lot of cultures don't support that. Right, so it's a lot easier for a third party to come in and say, hey, we can have these hard conversations, this is what we do, right? And so you have to, again, to me it's about being honest with yourself about what your capabilities are internally, and what your culture is like internally, and what you can't do. Because you've got to, and everybody's unique, right? You can't, there's no, hey, this is the model, we just go implement it and work for everybody.
There's a lot of truth to that. Culture's a big component. We see that all the time. You measure an ROI, but what about the culture piece? Like, are they open to even doing this? So if you're not spending a huge amount of time doing the change management, yikes.
Yeah.
What about, I'm going to switch gears here. So what about agility, adaptability during, to keep everybody focused on digital transformation? Lots of noise going on, right? Evolving markets, emerging technology, market shifts. How important is it to be agile and adaptable, and what do you use to, make sure that you're staying on track? Go ahead, Emmanuel.
So I guess it goes, we talked about a lot about different technologies, different emerging, tech or AI and everything else. I think there is a time and place to talk about those during the course of the digital transformation, but you need to get things at the right time. So you cannot, as you just mentioned, you cannot just talk to the plumber before you even have the blueprint of the house. So everything has to fit into the right place and the right timing of the project. So I think you need to, again, start from finding what works for you, what your goals are, and then fit the different technologies into place, where it actually helps, it has to be blended into the solution. It can't just be the solution that sticks out and say, okay, I'm implementing AI. No, you're not. You're implementing ERP, which uses AI and different markets. I think if you go with that notion, everything will run smoothly into your digital transformation, and you don't have to worry about, did we actually get AI or not? But it doesn't matter if it works and it achieves the goal and it's behind the scene, it has to let it.
What do you think about staying agile, being agile?
Well, I think a couple things come to mind. One is the cloud. So first of all, the migration to the cloud and that whole movement is sort of forcing organizations to be more agile in some ways because they don't have a choice in many cases when the changes happen with the technologies and whatnot. So in some ways, cloud is sort of forcing organizations to become more adaptable. But even setting that aside, I think if you look at change in general, it's easy to say, well, we need to be more agile, we need to change more. Well, to change, I mean, there's a million different directions you can go to change. But the key is how do you put parameters around the change, so we're changing for a reason and with purpose and going in the same direction. So if anything, I would say in order to change better and faster, you should narrow the change and the scope of the change so you're all heading in the same direction. Otherwise, it's just pure chaos if we say, let's throw in some AI and have that go change, go be nimble, go be agile. It's like, what does that mean? And we're suddenly stepping all over each other, going in a million different directions. So if anything, I think to be better change, you have to narrow the change.
You can't eat the elephant whole, is that right?
Exactly. That's good. That's good.
So you don't want to go to ERP because you want to go to the cloud, or because you want to go to AI, right? So
Yeah.
it has to fit into the bigger picture.
Yeah, what you're trying to do.
I think you need to avoid kind of shiny object syndrome,
Yeah.
right? And, you set a course, right? This is the performance objectives we're going after. We go through a process to pick a solution we think. Again, I think it's important to pick a partner that's got kind of innovation built into their DNA, so their product is going to evolve over time. Because that's where a lot of your innovation is going to come from. If you want to be truly agile and innovative, a lot of times in organizations you kind of have you need small groups to do that. You don't innovate at an enterprise level, right? You innovate in small groups. You try stuff, it works. You figure out how to scale it. You scale it, right? So they're kind of separate to me than say doing once you've made a decision on doing an ERP implementation or whatever your new technology is, it's designed to achieve a specific organizational outcome. That's your focus. And innovation is kind of a side thing. I do think that all organizations, us as consultants as well, are all going to be forced, I think, over the next 5 years to be constantly looking for the next change. I mean, we've kind of gone from, a lot of people, we've lived for a long time in this kind of change-resistant world, and now it's like, well, we need to kind of embrace change because it's coming all the time. And I think with one of the things that AI will do just as a general technology is it's going to move everything faster. New capabilities are going to come out faster than they did in the past. And so I think now you have to start to try and move your organization to where it's comfortable, not just embracing change, but looking for change. But again, in the context of what do we need to change to improve the performance of the organization? We all have a mission for our organization. What are we trying to do with that? And make sure that we're doing technology as a tool toward achieving those outcomes, not just as a shiny object for change. So they are trying to change.
Very, very good.
I guess what you're saying also is like, instead of going after the innovation by yourself, pick a right partner that has already implemented those innovations in their application, so that way you can just easily adopt those.
I think it's important, like when you look at when you look at selecting your solution partner, it's not a transaction; it's a relationship, right? And so you need to look at not just feature function set today, but what are they doing as a company? How well do you align from a values perspective? How do they treat you as a customer? I mean, there's a whole lot of things that it's almost in my mind more important to pick a partner that you can work with long term than it is the best product on the market today, right? And that I think that because it's a relationship, it's not transactional.
You know, Keith, I think that's essential. You know, I've seen on projects where like second or third best solution gets selected because they love the implementation company. They just felt like we could work with them, they relate to them, we get them. And so they go with the partner. And it just goes to show you how important that is. Good point. So let's talk about risks. You know, there's, you got to balance the potential for disruption and risk, especially in risk-averse companies or traditional companies and industries. Eric, you want to take a shot at that? How do you do that in your digital transformation projects?
Well, I think first of all, you have to quantify the risks on both sides of the transformation, even though we were talking in the break about transformations never really end. It's not a one and done, go live, done. But let's just assume you've got a dotted line where this is go live and this is kind of post implementation. A lot of times we tend to myopically focus on let's just control the scope, control the cost, and control the risk during the implementation without consideration of what happens after implementation. So in other words, if you come in on time, on budget, that's great. We might declare victory until we go live and realize, okay, we finished our time on budget, and now we can't ship product, and the operations are a disaster over here. And what does that cost us? It's rare for organizations to think about what that cost and risk is on the other side. So you have to look at the whole portfolio of risk from day one, starting a project with the risks, all the way through post-implementation, years after the fact, and how do you manage the risks? Because a lot of the decisions you make now during implementation are going to pay for later, or you'll benefit from it. They're the right decision. So organizations don't think a lot about that. I had one of the first projects I ever led when I first started Panorama was it was a mid-sized manufacturer, and we were implementing Epicor. Actually, was the product being implemented, and they had a complex product configuration process as an organization. And Epicor has a good product configurator, but they wanted to customize it. So they customized the functionality of the software. Long story short, it caused delays in the project. So the project kept getting delayed because they customized a bunch of stuff that they had planned on, and it added time and money to the project. And we had delayed the project twice. We were the program managers helping manage, have the first consultants and the other work streams. And we advised twice, delay the project if you're not ready. The customization still isn't fully vetted. And then there's a third delay that we'd said, you know what, you could go live now, but we highly suggest you go wait 30 more days. It was going to cost, I think, like $60,000. It wasn't going to be a huge amount of money. But the CEO said, no, we're done. I've delayed it twice already. I'm not delaying it again. So he saved $60,000, but when they went live, they lost over $10 million of orders that they just lost. They didn't delay the orders. They got canceled because they couldn't ship the product and the customers canceled the orders. So he looked at that and said, well, I lost a lot more than $60,000 that I would have potentially invested to save it. So you have to look at the full cost benefit. And it's interesting how most organizations don't think that far ahead, even though it's not that far ahead to think, a year or two down the road when you go live. So those are some of the things you got to think about is first of all, measure the risk. Be the first thing.
I think, I think first, manage risk is the right term. You can't avoid risk. There's no such thing as avoiding risk. You have to manage the risk. And I think you have to choose, you have to make the choices, right? You have to make the hard decisions. But in most cases, it's understanding both sides of the risk, right? So what is the risk? What happens if it occurs? What's the likelihood? It's all going to be discussed for a project, but it is a formal governance process that you have to have. It's not ad hoc, right? You have to always be looking for it. And again, a little bit self-serving, but there is a reason to bring in people that have done these before, because they're going to be able to anticipate some of these risks. They're going to have seen some of these things that your internal team, who maybe has done one or two implementation, they haven't seen the variety of things that an outside program manager might be able to come in and say, well, exactly that. Like, hey, you got to wait. Yeah, you can go live here. What's the cost of not going live? What's the risk of going live? And which one? Going eyes wide open, making choice, right?
Yeah. I think also there should be a lot of effort or time spent in real time understanding different aspects, talk to the stakeholders within the organization, and as much as possible get everything narrowed down, tugged down for the project. So we know that if there is a configuration that needs to be is customized, you should know it in advance, so planning into the whole project and not get a change order later down the line. Because as you go through or towards the end, any change is going to cost you double or triple. While you know, if you add that into your project plan from the get-go, it's going to be costing you less than in this case. So I would say that planning goes a long way for these kind of projects. The more you spend time in planning, it's going to cost you less at the end.
I also think part of that, you have to use that, I don't use wording in that we have in the project, because, again, our goal is always stay focused on the outcome we're trying to achieve, not just scope of the project, right? So if I have to make a change in the middle, I mean, we can spend a year planning, and we're still gonna do stuff we miss, there's still gonna be stuff we didn't anticipate, so, yes, it's important to plan really well on front, but then you have to be able to apply it to shift where it makes sense to shift, to manage those risks, all towards the eye of what is the outcome we're trying to achieve, right? And it's not going right? And I think that's people get hung up on a lot of times, quick. You know, we said by this date we were gonna go live. Is that what's important, or is it the outcome you're trying to achieve that's important? If you go live 30 days early, and it costs you $10 million, you really have to find the right thing to go.
So there are arbitrary timelines that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And well, it's also the misperception that more time, more money is bad. Now, on one hand, you do obviously have to manage stuff. You don't want to just blow the budget and spend unlimited resources, but you have to recognize, well, implementing faster and cheaper may not be the right thing to do. Like, it might be okay to say, no, let's add some time to that, or let's add to the budget because we want to do it right. Make sure we have like
Go with the ring, hand out the rings.
Yeah, I think that's another
but
reason.
not white knuckle. Yeah, white knuckle. That's
Everything's a balance, and again, I think it goes back to if you have people working with you that have done this over and over again, they're gonna have a better sense of not panicking, here's where we're at, wait, we may have to make an adjustment here. Whereas if you have people that are doing this, that have done it once or twice, they're not gonna have that sense of, hey, it may make sense to slow this down, because we're not gonna get able to go, we just keep marching forward. There is a certain level of experience that you can't imitate.
Keith, let me ask you, what role does leadership play in successfully making digital transformations happen?
Well, I think most leaders can still really do it. But ideally, well, that's the problem. You do see leaders like that. Like, hey, we made a decision, you guys go implement this, let me know when it's done. Leaders are critical. I think Eric talked a lot about this in his presentation. That ownership of the project, the executive sponsor, is probably the most critical resource on the project in a lot of cases. And an active engagement of that person during the project. Again, a lot of what we do in our role is supporting that executive sponsor. We can do a lot of the heavy lifting. We can help you write some of the communications. We can help with communication. There's a lot of things you can do to take that on. But you've got to be emotionally invested. You've got to be the one standing up, championing. It's extremely critical. You got to make the decisions, right? We talk about decision making. Like, we can put a governance structure in place to make those decisions in a timely manner. You still have to make the decisions. So somebody has to be engaged. You have to have the right. If you have to have the right executive sponsor, you have to have the right standing committee. I think it's extremely important that ownership. You can outsource a lot of the expertise. You cannot outsource ownership. And you're the one. You're the one writing the checks, and B, you're the one that's going to get hopefully the benefit out of that spend. So you just can't. I don't know if they say how important leadership is from that client perspective.
Eric, what about leadership fostering a culture where there's continuous innovation?
Yeah, well, I think as leaders, leaders need to first of all define why innovation is important. It's not innovation just for innovation's sake, or it's not just agile or being nimble just for agility's sake. It's more about why is it important to us as a business? What are we trying to do? Are we in a dire situation where competitors are eating our lunch and we need to be innovative to survive? Is it we want to stay ahead of the competition? Is it because our customers expect it from us? Is it because we want to make for a more interesting work environment? Is it all the above? I mean, there's all these questions you have to answer as a leader and articulate that vision of why being agile and being nimble and innovative is so important. But then once you've done that, then you have to sort of define how. Like, how are we going to create innovation? You can't just, it's not enough just to say, we need you guys to be more innovative, so could you please go be more, do it. Be more innovative, be more innovative. So you have to provide the tools and the processes and the organizational structure to say, this is, we're sort of redesigning the organization, or we're, building a culture of innovation, which includes putting the right tools in place, the right processes, the right people, the right org design behind it. So it's really looking at the complete picture of how the organization is going to be structured, and then rolling out those changes. Which, by the way, spoiler alert, it doesn't have a lot to do with technology. The technology is going to enable some of it, but it's going to be more the tone you set for what your operational model is and how people are going to do their jobs, and then of course the technology is going to come in behind that. So it sounds easy, but there's a lot to what I just said. But you have to go a lot deeper than most leaders want to go in terms of not just defining vision, but also defining how.
Yeah, they have to recognize that they have to do that.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything?
The role of the leaders in general is not only enablement, but also they have to participate throughout the project and make sure that not only the project stays to their vision, but aligned with the vision of the organization and what they see the organization trying to do, but also make critical decisions at the right time to and get help. Like, the leaders has to get help from trusted advisors, now whether it be internal or external, to compensate for the lack of their understanding of what the change is. So that's where I think that some of the problems can come, because they have a vision, they want to go that route, and they say, okay, go do it, but then in the process, they have to make decisions that they may actually not know how to make those decisions. So we cannot just leave the decision all to them, but also you have to enable them, you have to help them as well to make those decisions. That's, to me, it's not just giving them the responsibility, but also enable them to make the right decision, whether to do with the innovations or with the culture change or anything else that comes in. It has to, be aligned with the project, with the stakeholders, and also with the vision.
Added benefit of getting an outside party to assist.
Yeah, but again, it has to, I think the leadership, like you said it right, it's not one person, it has to be a steering committee. It has to be a group of people that have the best interests of the organization in mind, with different departments, and also in that steering committee, you can have advisors that are from outside who have done the job before, so that way they can help the steering committee steer the project in the right way when they need the extra help and knowledge.
Great. So let's talk about change, now that we're on that topic. You spent a lot of time, Eric, talking about organizational change management. But how do you approach that when there's a lot of resistance to it?
Well, first of all, I'd say that usually there's not a lot of resistance on the surface. In fact, I would prefer the resistance was obvious, because it's easier for organizations to see it and attack it when there's people trying to sabotage the project. Not that you want that kind of negativity, but at least you can see it. It's obvious what's happening. The harder part of change is sort of like a tip or below the tip of the iceberg, where it's the more subtle changes where on the surface people are excited, on the surface people are nodding their heads and saying, yes, we want to do this, and yes, we're excited. But then once you start encroaching on the way they do things today, and it becomes personal, and I mentioned the spreadsheet example today. I've been using the spreadsheet for 20 years that I built, like highly engineered macros, and then take the calculations in the spreadsheet. And through my heroics and tribal knowledge, I'm able to take this spreadsheet and add a ton of value to the organization. Once I realize you're taking that away, and now you're not going to rely on my heroics, you're going to value me potentially, but you're not going to rely on my heroics and my tribal knowledge, because you're going to codify it and centralize it. that's where I start to push back, and not because I'm a bad person, not because I don't want what's best for the organization, but because at some point I do look out for my own preservation and self-interest. So I think, to me, the bigger risk is that subtle, unintentional resistance that comes from a good place. It's usually not because people are bad. But like I said, the people that are flat out sabotaging the project, they're easier to deal with because you can just go head on and attack it and say, either get on board or change the people, is one of my mentors used to say. But so that's the way you have to look at it. Is just how do you get below the surface of thinking everything's fine? How do you get below the surface to identify where the potential resistance to change is, and understanding the root cause as to why they're resistant to change. Well, it's not because they're trying to sabotage the project; it's because they're worried about losing something, and you haven't shown them that they're not losing. You just try to sell them on this grand vision of how the company's going to be better, and everything's going to be so great. But all I'm really hearing is you take away that spreadsheet and my heroics and all the value I've added to the organization.
And probably control also, because whoever controls data controls, has some control overall in the decision. So that control aspect is actually something that people probably would resist to change many times. And on the surface, again, they might be all good with the change as long as it doesn't affect them. Changes everybody else around them, but they're immune somehow because they have that key Excel sheet that nobody else can touch. So that probably is the hidden part of the change problem that probably is more hard to deal with. But you have to deal with it. You have to make sure that everybody participates and starting from the very beginning of the project, get everybody involved in the decision-making process. They understand what the change is, and somehow get them on board.
I think Medi's point is really key about the earlier you can engage people in the project, and it's like we see it all the time where it's like, oh yeah, we do change management, and it starts training. So yeah, the more you can involve people, even if you don't really take all of their input, but the fact that you listen to them, you heard their concerns early on in the process, the more buy-in they are. You always have to answer the what's in it for me, right? I'm giving up this spreadsheet, what's in it for me, what do I get out of that, right? And there always is. There usually is something you can find, hey, this is about this, even if it's just keeping track, right? There's always a what's in it for me. So I think that's a critical part of that as well. So engage early and make sure you're answering the question. The other thing is, change is not, I think the reason that it gets missed a lot of times is it's not glamorous, and it's roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. And it's done, you can't do change at a macro level. You can't go, the organization's going to change. You have to do it at an individual level, right? You really actually have to get down to roles and individuals and deal with what actually is happening to them. Like how, I can't train you at a department level. I have to train you in what is your role, how is your role going to change, and it's not just you letting them.
And that blends itself into kind of a cultural improvement or pathway improvement. Good point about how you have to start that change management at the beginning during the planning stuff. It's good. Involve people, they won't resist, right?
Well,
they'll resist less.
Some resist.
They'll resist less.
I think to Eric's point, you just assume resistance. So to your point, if you're not seeing any resistance, something's wrong. So you just assume resistance. Whether you say anything or not, I still have to talk about what's in it for you and how you will change and what the impacts are going to be and what you can have at that individual level. And so that requires a lot of work. Obviously, a consultant can't come in and talk to all 1,000 employees in the company, but you have to work with the leadership team and drive that down to the organization. Somebody's got to have that understanding at that lowest level. First, we got to get feedback from that lowest level. Second, we got to make sure we're clear on how is that role going to change, and then we have to help them through that process.
Do you have a question?
I've got a question, of course. How would you guys coach your implementation partners to add OCM as part of their pre-sale, right? Because add organizational change management or add any leadership aspects before they, like, you know, if the stakeholder doesn't have, or if the client doesn't have the knowledge, how would you coach your implementation partners?
Well, I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but what we've done is we've white labeled change consulting services to our two other implementation partners to give them a monetary incentive to where it's like, okay, this is part of your offering, and we'll do the work, behind the scenes alongside with your team, so you create that sort of economic incentive. But that's just a pure corporate business thing that we do. But as far as like convincing someone, I mean, I think it's more about if you look at what is a change consultant like our firms or an implementation partner both want, and they both want the client to be successful. So I think it's speaking that language and saying, okay, to make this client successful, we need what you do, and we also need change management, which we or someone else could provide for you, but someone needs to do the change management piece of it. So I think just highlighting and educating that this is the key to success. And also, by the way, we're not just here to implement technology, we're here to improve and change the business. I think the problem that a lot of software vendors have, and I apologize to many of you who are software vendors, I think software vendors have like the blinders on. They think, okay, my technology is working, I don't know what the problem here is. It's working for the client, it's adding a lot of value, I see all the capabilities it has in software, and they go away and don't realize that, well, it didn't deliver value to the company, not because the software sucks, just because they didn't deploy it right, or they didn't do change management. So I don't know how to change that, that's just that's a broken part of the industry, for sure, but I think just educating and focusing on a common goal would be.
And I think the, having conversations with those implementation partners, a lot of it really is, like being clear with the client on what they own, and what the technology partner owns, and understanding whether, as a technology partner, whether you like it or not, you may be perfect, you may have executed flawlessly. If that project doesn't deliver, the CEO is not standing up there saying, yeah, we screwed up, they did a great job.
Yeah.
You're getting the blame, right? So whether you are encouraging the client to bring in a third party or to do it themselves, you just got to be clear. Like, you guys own this part of the project, but we don't do that for you. And to the extent that if you are going to do it, if you are going to say, hey, as part of our implementation services, we do change management, you need to be really clear on what those are, and you need to, it's not train the trainer. You really need to understand change management, whether you might have worked through something like Eric's company, or you have that internal capability in your, which I have found in very many vendors. You just have to be honest about what you can. Again, it's understanding roles and responsibilities. Everybody be honest about what our capabilities are, and we got to have all these capabilities come together to deliver the outcomes we're looking for. So I think it's honest conversations with those partners, but also making them understand. It doesn't do you any good to ignore this part. You're going to get whether you like it or not. If change management doesn't go well, for whatever reason, technology is going to get
And I hadn't thought of this until you just said it, but if I look at an implementation partner's plan and their results, and let's just say you or I look at it and it's like, that's perfect, they nailed it, they did everything exactly the way they should have. I still don't know with any sort of certainty whether that project was successful. I have no idea, because that doesn't mean the project was successful. It means that the technology is working and it's designed to fit the specifications, all that stuff.
Efficiencies,
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
See that.
but it's still 50-50 at best. I mean, it's successful, even if the implementation partner did everything they should have done. But to your point, they're going to get blamed for it, right? If things don't, if the end result.
Yeah, well, you went through your expert witness stuff, right? I mean, technology is one piece of that, right? And so, if you do the technology perfect, you're still getting the blame for it, right? It doesn't really matter what you say.
Yeah.
And the more honest you are up front, I think, with what those different roles and responsibilities are and what you're not doing, the more that insulates you from some of that.
And what we do, we encourage the implementation partners to talk to us as a third party that knows the client, probably has a better history with them, knows the culture a little bit better than them because they're latecomers to the game. So we encourage them to use our relationship with the client to get better understanding of where the problems might be.
That's good. So we're coming up to time, but I have a question about data. You know, how do you get the organization to be more data-driven, to use data in the decision-making process? You want to start off, Matty?
That's our, you take advice. Yeah. Besides that, of course, you need to capture all the information, store it, and make proper decision based on facts and not fictions, right? So you need to be able to put values in every single aspect of the decision. Every factor in the decision has to have a, impact in the overall, and you have to be able to quantify that. So how do you do that? Is through decision models, right? So, and whether you use KPIs or not, that's besides the point, but lots of companies have a methodology that it goes beyond just making decisions based on gut feeling. So when you go wrong in the decision is when you're trying to, look at the screen, say, okay, that screen looks nice, but doesn't really do the job. So then when you fail is when you actually try to make decisions based on emotions. So, I think that based on what we do, we try to always make decisions based on facts and figures, right? So I can't think of any other way. Just put the model in, put some numbers, and make decisions based on that.
Well, I think I'm a little bit different because I hate the term data driven, to be honest with you. I think decisions are data driven.
Information.
Right. I think you said earlier, hey, I put the data in, and you came out third. I'm more comfortable working with you. There's subjective and there's objective information you have to take into account. Everything should be data informed. Data driven means you came out and you went under actually built no matter what. Like I think data informed is a better term than data driven. Data driven is like, yeah, no, the data said this, that's what we do. Then AI can't take my job.
So
Like at that point, like, oh, the data said this, I'll be the decision maker.
Yes, there are two aspects. Like for example, we have quantified and qualitative and quantitative approaches. So you have certain parts that are quantitative and the other parts are qualitative.
Yeah.
So those qualitative, criteria, you actually, as a user, you judge and you still put numbers. So that's how we try to make it data, what you said?
Informed.
Data informed. Yeah, that's
So
very-
part of that data informed, let me ask you a question. How do you, at all levels of the organization, get everybody to use the data in their decision-making process and to make informed decisions?
I think first you have to have data that people trust, and that's been a challenge for organizations for decades. Is they've gone from ERP system to ERP system, or homegrown system like the ERP system, and they haven't cleaned up the data, or it's gotten corrupt over time, so people don't trust the data, and they've worked around it with manual processes to try and clean up the data or create reports that somewhat reflect reality. So I think you have to have people to trust the data, and I think most organizations don't find themselves in that position. The good news with AI, though, is that AI forces, in a lot of ways, it's going to force the hands of organizations to have good data, because you can't fake your way through an AI model without good data. You can fake your way through BI reporting, because you can just manipulate the data and get it from multiple sources or whatever, and manually create what you want. AI, that's not going to work with AI. So the good news with the push to AI is it's going to force organizations to clean it up whether they like it or not. And at that point, not that that'll solve all the problems, but at least people can trust the data at that point, and then presumably it'll start to.
Yeah, I also think those, you have to realize, so I think it's, part of it's just culture and leadership, right? You have to ask the questions, how did you come to this conclusion? What information did you use for this conclusion? What's that? There's no such thing as perfect data. I don't think there will be such thing as perfect data. So you gotta get people comfortable with, you're not making a decision based on the exception you found. You're making a decision based on the rule of the 99%, right? So, you can make good decisions, solid decisions on directional data. You don't have to have 100% accuracy. And I think the people who wait for 100% accuracy don't make decisions. right? So you just have to be okay with like, hey, we think the data is good enough, it's directionally correct, I can take that plus my subjective inputs and go at that. And again, at this point, people still have to make those decisions, right? And I think that's the component that you have to take into account a lot of stuff that's not electronically quantified in numbers when you're making these decisions. So it's actually pretty, and then you have to, again, quite frankly, it has to be, you can't beat people up for making the wrong decision, right? If you make the same mistake every time, then you have probably got an issue. But you could make, I mean, we all make wrong decisions, right? And so recognize it, learn from it, and move forward. If you're going to have a culture where, you know, every time somebody makes a decision and it doesn't turn out right, that, you know, there's punishment involved. And, you know, people are going to wait for perfect data to make a decision, so the decision is made. So I think there's a culture around it.
Yeah, there's a level of risk that is acceptable. You have to know that as well, and that means not bad to make the decision.
So number one, get to a point where you can trust the data. Then you can leverage it by coaching your team to use the data to make their team look at as part of an informed decision. Right?
Great summary.
Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Heather Ann.
I guess I was just wondering, have you all ever encountered, or like, what would you recommend to a company or an organization who really kind of has a perception that OCM is limited to like one of the major change models, like a ADCAR ProSci or like even Six Sigma or Cotter, to kind of expand their, really expand and invest in really a more comprehensive like OCM strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it goes back to one size not fitting all, and recognizing that those are all great tools that you mentioned, and methodologies and frameworks, but you got to pull the pieces that most apply to you. And I think to make that decision or even make an observation over whether any of those models are appropriate, you have to do that organizational assessment up front. And then once you've done the assessment and you understand where the pockets of resistance are, what the cultural challenges are that you're going to face through the transformation, then you can be more targeted and say, okay, these pieces of Cotter might work, these pieces of ProSci might work, these pieces of another methodology might work, and you have to create something that's specific to you guys. Otherwise, it ends up being like a mass shotgun approach, scattershot approach, where you try a bunch of stuff and see what sticks, and you waste a lot of time. And then people get down on change management and say, see, this is why I shouldn't have done change management, because it's just a mess with stuff. And so I think, if anything, it might help speak the language to executives, because you're actually saying, we're not going to do everything. We're not saying do all this stuff. We're saying do these targeted things that are specific to us. And it's, by the way, based on an assessment that we did, it is specific to us.
I do think it's important, you know, whether you create a custom one or whether you adopt a framework is important that you're going to run under, right? So you've got to have something that you guys as an organization buy into and say, yeah, we believe, whether, you know, say ADCAR, we believe this is the process people go through. Now, how are we going to apply that in our organization? Or are we going to take bits of this and craft our own method? But having a method so you can consistently apply it is important. You know, you can't go, well, we're just going to wing it all the time, right? And so having that, but then the other thing that that framework gives you is the ability to measure. Like, are we really moving the needle on this stuff?
So start with the end in mind.
Always.
Any other questions? Neil? John?
I have one. We're all consultants, and we always get a bad rap for, you know, being a consultant. You know what I mean, right? Do you guys ever say no to a client? Do you ever walk away from a client? And
Yes.
Good answer.
I'm just curious.
But I don't admit it out loud very often, because it's a slippery slope. Because if you turn down one client, it's too easy to blame clients for being crazy or for being unsophisticated or for being difficult or for being stressful or whatever. And this is more as a leader, not as a consultant. But as a leader, it's hard to tell your team, yeah, if you don't like that client, yeah, we can fire them. Because there's always a reason to fire every client. I mean, I can give you a reason for every single client we have why we should not work with them.
But do you say no to a client before you actually sign them as a client?
That's where I would
yeah.
do. Like, I don't think you should fire clients. I think that would be a very unusual circumstance. But there's a lot of times where you go, we don't have the same view of the world, right? And if we don't have the same view of the world, it's kind of like aligning expectations up front. And, you know, if we don't have aligned expectations going in, it's gonna fail, right? And so we're gonna fail, you're gonna fail, this is not gonna be a successful relationship. So, yeah, I think, as a matter of fact, I think it's important that you're comfortable saying no to clients.
Yeah.
That you actually evaluate, are we seeing eye to eye on this? Do we have a good value match? Do we match on our perspective, our point of view on how we're gonna move this forward? Because if you don't, it's gonna be a failed project at some point.
But before getting there, we try to, change their mind. They try to educate, try to bring them on board with the methodology or the vision that we have. I don't remember ever we actually said no, but in theory we could, but usually we are successful to bring them on board until they say no to us.
It's really hard to say no, right? Because you want the revenue.
It's hard to walk away from revenue.
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting out, like.
Yes, it is.
When we were younger, we wouldn't say no, ever.
But I'm sure there's times in your gut that you said you wanted to say no, but you said yes, and then halfway through the engagement, you're like, yeah, maybe I should listen to my gut.
There's definitely ones that we should have said no to, because a lot of times it comes down to expectations, let's say during the sales cycle, they negotiate the scope way down, and then later on, they end up wanting what you originally proposed to them, they want it for the price that they negotiated down to.
That's usually the case with us too, like you said, we should have charged more, but.
Yeah. And a lot of that is maturities and organization, usually it's oddly enough, it's usually the smaller, mid-sized clients where we have that problem. The bigger clients, they might beat us up on rates or whatever, but it's not extreme, as far as the smaller companies that just don't understand what they signed up for.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Anyone else? Have questions?
Susan's got 20 minutes.
It's all.
That's funny, no. Final question, I think we should all leave the room with a tip from each of you guys. So we're going through an implementation journey or digital transformation. What's a tip you can leave us with?
That we haven't already covered?
That you haven't, well, or you
We
can
already-
repeat and say, if there's one
This is
thing.
the only thing we're gonna remember.
This is the only
The
thing
only
you
thing you
remember.
remember, the
before
only
you
reason,
leave.
from my perspective, it's not a technology project, it's a performance improvement
Thank you.
project. Whatever you do, don't get enamored of the technology, there's a reason you're doing it, and stay true to that. That's what you're trying to do to achieve an organizational or business objective. And technology is just a way of getting that.
Yeah, I think we started the event off the definition that supported that, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Eric, next.
I think if I had to pick only one, I'd say probably just be realistic in your planning and just what you expect to get out of the project. And maybe it's aligned or timed with the secondary. In addition to being realistic, also part of being realistic means you have to sort of take everything with a grain of salt and recognize you're being sold to. Software vendors are trying to sell you, third stage is trying to sell you, SIs are trying to sell you, MSS is trying to sell you. We're all trying to sell you, right? So you have to recognize that you have to do what's best for you and be realistic about what's for you, and take everything with a grain of salt and pick and choose what makes the most sense for your organization.
My end, that's like a combination of both actually. Where you are is and where you want to go is very important, and how you get there through the roadmap of the project. So define those ahead of time, know where you're going, set the expectations, and that's where you can actually reduce the risk of the project.
I guess I want to add to that, because it makes sense if you understand where you're going, then any effort that you make contributes to where you're going foundationally. So it's not like a temporary gap. It's not a band-aid. It's strategic. So everything's done strategically to support scalability, growth, everything, all those nice words we're looking for.
The nice words.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Analysts, great job.